you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Today is Wednesday, April the 12th. This is the regularly scheduled.
This meeting is being transcribed.
Thank you. This is the
This
regularly
meeting is
scheduled
being recorded.
Collection Services Board meeting. I will get us started first by reading, going through roll call vote to make sure we have quorum. So when you hear your name, if you could please let me know that you're here, and then we'll be able to proceed. Mr. Chip Hellman.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Zekovich.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Greg Zworski.
Here.
Thank you. Jason Hill is not here today with us, and Ms. Lori Hadwood. Thank you. We have quorum and are ready to proceed. And I'll mark us here at 9:30. Notice of this meeting was posted on January 11th, 2023 for the Collection Service meeting date and time and location. The updated agenda was posted on January the 4th of 2023 as well. And then, of course, this agenda has been on the website with the current format since April the 5th. And so with that, we will proceed with the agenda. If there are any amendments that the board would like to make to the agenda in front of you, please let me know. Otherwise, we would need a motion to accept the agenda for today.
I move we accept the agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Chip. And the second is by Greg. All those in motion to accept the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Wonderful. Because this is our first meeting for the year, we would need to make sure that we adopt Robert's Rules of Order. And if there are any questions on those proceedings and how that takes place, our attorney, Hugh Cross, is here to explain those. Otherwise, if we could have a motion to accept, and this is always done at that first meeting of the year to make sure we follow those steps.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Tony? I'm sorry. Was it Chip?
Yes.
I missed the second. Thank you. I was looking up. We have a motion by Greg and a second by Chip to accept and process our work using Robert's Rules of Order. All those in agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Wonderful. You have on your iPads the documents, the agenda, as well as starting with page 2, the October minutes that were also emailed to each member. If you would like to take a quick moment to review. If you see any changes, I welcome those so we can update them before posting them to the website. If there are no changes to the October board meeting minutes, we would need a motion to accept as presented.
Motion to accept minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Tony and a second by Greg to accept the minutes as presented. All those in agreement, please say aye. Aye. Perfect. That carries. On your agenda on page 6 of the documents is our financial report. Given again that this is our first meeting in October, I don't believe we had the final numbers for the fiscal year 2021-2022 closure, so that information is there before you. We closed with a total surplus of $928,288. That's our ongoing reserve. As of January for 2023, that closing number has us showing a deficit of right at $1,100 or $1,200, $1,199, reducing the reserve by a little bit. And we've talked about that trend. We probably will see this continue to drop. Last year, we did end up in the positive, which was wonderful, but about as close as you can get. I think it was a little over $2,000. So, just one of those items. That's information for you. I always welcome any questions that you've got about any of these numbers. Next, before we proceed to the legal report, this again is one of those things we take care of each first meeting. We would need to appoint and nominate a chair for the board to proceed with, and then a vice chair. I welcome any names that you have and motions to accept those. That is correct. And this board does. Okay.
I second that.
All right.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Greg Zworski to nominate Mr. Hellman as chair, and a second by Tony Zekovich. All those in favor of the nomination and Mr. Hellman staying as chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. So we have the chair taken care of, and vice chair currently. Greg Zaworski is our vice chair. We would need a nomination.
Nominate Greg Swirsky as the vice chair.
In this fun. And Lori as a second to nominate Greg Zaworski as the vice chair. And last but not least, we would need a secretary. And
Tony, were you secretary this past year?
I was.
Well, I make a motion that Tony be nominated, or I'd make a nomination that Tony retain that position.
wonderful. So for the secretary position to also stay the same, leaving Tony Zikovich as the secretary. Chip Hellman is made the motion, and the second by Lori. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Wonderful. Thank you. All those three positions are staying as is. I appreciate that. And I will turn it over to our attorney, Hugh Cross, and your legal report on the iPad starts on page 8. It's all yours, Hugh.
All right, thank you, and good morning. But you have the legal report in front of you there, and if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. It was fairly straightforward as far as cases go.
I'll speak up. I don't really have any questions. As you said, these are pretty straightforward, and essentially, with maybe just one exception, you've closed. They're all closed, except for the one, number 5, with the letter of warning, which is pretty standard to what we've done for unlicensed activity.
Yeah, I mean, if there's no questions, then I just need to have it approved, and we'll move forward. I did have the day I had this legal report approved, I believe another 8 cases came through the same day. So it's like,
Oh, wow.
I would have loved to have got them on here, but I looked at those cases as well, fairly similar. I mean, I'm trying. I mean, if there's a violation, there's a violation, but if there's not, I mean, there's nothing to do. And for these cases on this legal report, the documentation was pretty strong on the respondent side. Everything was there. So, and that's what they needed. I mean, that's what I want to see.
Sure.
They're supposed to. So,
Just will remind all of us, especially Lori, since you're new, but there was a day when everything ever brought before you guys made this legal report list, and we went through every one of them, 30, 40, sometimes 50 of them. And what you guys are doing is trying to close, really resolve everything you can. The goal isn't to make this large or
Right.
to ping agencies. The goal is just to keep people in compliance. And you guys are doing a great job administratively of keeping this list down.
Agreed. That's awesome.
well, thank you. There's a lot of debt disputes. I know I've mentioned that before. It's some of these. If it's a straight debt dispute, I mean, I'll be asked ahead of time if this is something that should be open, and I'll generally decline, because if it's, out of jurisdiction, or if it's just a straight debt dispute, there's nothing to. I mean, I have no authority over that, and the board has no authority over.
Right.
If someone disputes a debt, I mean,
FDCPA covers that very well.
Right.
And agencies know how to respond.
So.
Unless somebody's egregiously trying to collect money that's not owed or something, but that's not normal course.
Question on the debt dispute, is that something they have to go to court, since we don't have jurisdiction over that? They have to go to court with that? I know you mentioned that
So they have to,
FDCPA covers that, but
The consumer has the right to dispute the debt in writing after receiving what's called, or at any point in time, but agencies are required by law within 5 days of the initial communication to send a validation notice, which gives the consumer all of their rights. And so they have the right to dispute the balance. It says in writing, most agencies accept verbal disputes. What most agencies do then is place the account on hold while they check with the original creditor, look at all the paperwork, and make sure the debt is owed and provide all that proof to the consumer. Then they restart their collection activity. If a consumer disputes a debt and doesn't agree with the collection agency's proof that the debt is owed, then they look for somebody else to complain to. And
I mean, that's basically it. I mean, my understanding with the law is it's you have the dispute, the written dispute, verbal dispute. If my understanding is it needs to be written, but I know some agencies accept verbal, and it's documented as verbal. But then once it's disputed, they exactly what he described. They put it on hold, and then they contact the creditor just to get an agreement or something that can show the proof of it. And if the proof is there that the consumer owes the debt, then it can go back to collection at that point. I mean, if they say it's fraud, they have to submit proof of fraud. I mean, they have to show something. You can't just say I didn't pay it and then just let it go, because then even if it doesn't go to even if the collection agency gives it back, they give the account back, it can still go to the credit bureaus and it'll be sitting there on the credit, and so they'll have to tackle it somehow or another. It's just not something that we can deal with here.
But in answering your question about going to court, it's up to the original creditor to give the collection agency or an attorney the permission to sue the debtor. So that's how it would end up in court. Yeah.
And then once it's in court, it's out of our hands too. I mean, once it's there, even if we help the complaint in some sort of litigation hold, which we've done that in the past, but not for collections as far as I know, but for bigger boards. I mean, even if that were to happen, we'd still have to wait for the court to issue an order on it. I mean, you don't want to contradict the court. I mean, once it goes there, that's gonna be the final say. I mean, I get those sometimes too, or it's just someone is saying that like the collection's already passed everything. The collection agency has already passed all the steps, and they've already went to court. And I mean, and they want a judgment. I mean, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do, at least for the complainant. I mean, if you're complaining about losing a judgment in court and coming to the board, I mean, we're not going to have any jurisdiction over that. So.
You look at number 4 of the legal report real quick, number 4 and then number 6, exactly what we've talked about, which they've dealt with. Number 4, the summary says this complaint alleges a billing issue with the initial creditor and that no validation of debt was provided. That's that letter I was telling you about. Respondent stated that the validation of debt has been provided, a billing statement, etc. But we close that because it's a he said, she said. The consumer says, I never got it. The agency says, well, we can show where we sent it. Yeah. Sorry you didn't get it. Then number 6 is kind of the reverse of that. The complainant alleges that they don't owe this money, right? They dispute it, and the respondent checked back with the original creditor, and the account has been paid in full or settled in full, and somehow the creditor didn't notify the agency, so of course the agency is going to stop collecting, and so that one's closed. So it's kind of both sides of that same. Consumers have rights, and agencies, but in both cases, the agency did exactly what they're supposed to do.
I see a lot of that with the disputes. Like the consumer will put the dispute in writing as they're supposed to do. I mean, sometimes way late in the ball game, but the dispute is still there, and the agency will respond. But then there's nothing else from the consumer, so I can't. I mean, there's nothing I can do if I don't have any other information that says that this is fraudulent or there's some reason why it should be disputed and you don't owe it. I mean, a lot of times I'll get a billing statement in the case file that has the consumer's name on it, and a prior address, sometimes I can run a clear report called a clear report just to see if the addresses match up. And most of the time it does that I've seen. I mean, even if it didn't, I mean, if for some reason that the name is the same, but the addresses are different from the past or something, I mean, I still don't know that I would be able to do much unless
Right.
there's some sort of police report or something that says that fraud has occurred. Because if you've got a
Even
credit
then-
card statement with your name on it, I mean,
Right. Even then, the consumer would have been informed to notify the collection agency that
Right.
there was fraud here. And I guess the public statement that I want to make is, of course, obviously I'm from the industry, but most agencies try everything in their power to be as compliant and consumer friendly as possible. Oftentimes there are little disputes and so forth. Very few agencies are out there trying to abuse consumers. They're all trying to do it the right way because of what somebody said earlier, CFPB and others. I mean, that's terrible. Plus consumer attorneys who are litigating. I mean, we got to try to do it all right and document it. And so that leaves very little that the state can do over and above what's already happening out there, I guess.
yeah, I mean, even for, I can find which complaint, let me see, but one of them alleges harassment. And, and harassment there's a statutory definition for it in the collection service statutes as well as the rules that discusses what harassment is. And it seems a lot of times when I get harassed, sometimes there is, like we've issued letter of warnings and things for agents that seem to be harassment, repeated phone calls, things like that, off-hour phone calls, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of times there's an allegation for harassment, and it's really just the fact that the collection agency contacted them, and that's not harassment. I mean, that's just an attempt to collect. And if you're licensed, then an attempt to collect is valid as long as it's within the restrictions. So, I mean, even that is, I look at that as a separate allegation, and I try to spell out the allegations if there are multiple ones, harassment or debt dispute, and try to go through them all and not just bunch them all together. And if I find something, I'll put it on here for sure. But on this legal report, I didn't. So
Well, you're doing a great job. I'm loving the sort of the feel for how you're trying to think about it from both sides and make sure it's something that really you should get involved with. So, do we need to read these cases into the record?
No, not really. If there are no changes, and I love the conversation, and yet Hugh does outstanding. You're right.
Yeah.
I remember when I first took on collections, the number of cases and the time we were here debating them, when there's consistency in the decisions. And so that's what he's able to do. So it's fantastic. So no, if there are no changes, we need a motion and a second to accept as presented.
Go ahead.
I move to accept.
Thank you. We have a motion by Greg Zaworski and a second by Lori Hadwig. All those in favor of accepting the legal report with the recommendations as made, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Oh,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you. The last item that we have on the agenda would be under new business. I just want to make sure to talk a little bit about the NACARA conference. It feels like it happened, at least a year ago, but that's not the case given that we did not have our January meeting. Time has really gone by quickly. And so, of course, that conference was held here in Nashville. It was October 12th through the 14th. From my perspective, it was wonderful. The topics, the speakers, all of it was great. Bob and I were very fortunate to be able to attend. And of course, Chip and Greg, you both attended. So any feedback that you have, Tony and Lori in particular that weren't there, I'm sure they welcome it, but
Go ahead,
it was
Greg.
very good.
I was here for most of the day. I had to leave a little early, but the speakers were great. Like you said, I thought it was very informative. I don't know what happened on the day. Chip, you were here the day before, is that right? Or
I can't remember. I know I had to go somewhere afterwards, fly somewhere, but I can't remember
There at
which
least
day.
one of the
But it
days,
was
yes.
a great day.
and did you speak as well?
I was on
Yes.
a panel.
Panel.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wasn't invited for that day because that's industry. Yeah.
It was good. It was very informative. Bob did outstanding helping coordinate. I mean, it
Absolutely.
really flowed very smooth. They were very happy with the gifts that the board spent money
Oh,
on
that
to
was
get.
cool.
Good.
That all was great. I thought the whole thing was great. I always enjoy hearing John McNamara speak, especially when it's not a gigantic audience, and he kind of, I guess I would say, he follows his agenda, but he's a little bit more open. And I thought he was real candid on some things. And
Yeah, he was in the industry for many years before he went to the CFPB, so he has an understanding of what we do.
yeah, it's really
He's,
good.
he's not on our side, I wouldn't think, but
No, and he brought out some points. We don't need to get too far into the minutia here, but for example, there's a big issue right now about credit card debt not being reported. There's some states to the credit bureaus. Let me finish the sentence. Some states are taking state actions to really ratchet that back. The state of Colorado, where our company's headquartered, as an example, is really ratcheting back the ability to report medical debt to credit bureaus, which hampers collection efforts, obviously. But the part of it that I hadn't thought of, because I just thought that was consumer legislation, that whole subject was just trying to help consumers. And he said, no, not at all. It's all about the algorithms that the bureaus use to determine creditworthiness of consumers. And what they determine as they crunch all the data is medical debt really has virtually no impact on somebody's ability to repay or creditworthiness. And so the credit bureaus are going to are already carving that out of their algorithms. And so if it's not even going to be considered medical debt in the math on Chip's creditworthiness, why would you go to the trouble of even reporting? And so it was just fascinating to hear him talk through that. It's not about consumer legislation trying to help consumers. It's that the bureaus themselves are saying our numbers don't reflect that medical debt has any impact on somebody's ability to repay a car loan or a house note. So if we're not going to factor it in, why go through the trouble of reporting? Anyway, it was just, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective.
But do you agree with that?
I don't personally agree with it. I've been vocal in my circles, and I don't travel that widely, in my circles about believing medical debt should be reported. But of course, and I say debt collection is all right. Collector's leverage and something to talk about. So I don't agree with it. Yeah. But when I heard what was behind it, that it wasn't some consumer group trying to help consumers, it was just specifically that themselves critics are not.
Did you come up to the microphone? There you go. Now I got you.
As being a big impact. So it was just a different side of the argument that I had never thought about. But no, I think everybody should be reported to the Bureau.
Thank you. I think everybody's impression was very, very welcoming. You're right. We're probably planning this year's, but it goes by really quickly. So.
Yeah. Nashville's a great city to host an event like that.
It really was. Yeah. Good. I'm so excited that it went well. And again, without Bob, we couldn't have helped the way we did. Right. I mean, he ran all of that, so it was really a great thing.
We were strong. We showed strong.
Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great job, Bob.
Absolutely. So, board, I don't have anything else. I welcome any other topics that we want to discuss, and if there are none, then just a motion to adjourn. But otherwise, I think everything is here. If the members need anything after the meeting, you know to reach us.
You didn't. Motion to adjourn. Oh. Well, that closes that. No other issues, I guess.
Thank you. We have a motion by Lori and a second by Tony. So we are adjourned, and it is 9:55, right at about a half hour, I think. So everything done. Thank you all so
Yeah,
much.
thank
and
you all. You
we're
make it easy.
Done. Thank
Hey,
you.
I see this right here. This